He walked into the courtroom wearing the same uniform they once cheered. Only now they wouldn't even look him in the eye. The judge paused, then asked, "Are you really who you say you are?" A medal of honor on his chest, and yet his identity was on trial. The jury shifted uncomfortably. Then the prosecution dropped a photo that changed everything. What they exposed wasn't just a lie. It was a cover-up 4 decades deep. Before we deep dive into this interesting story, subscribe to our channel, and tell us where are you watching from. Share in the comments below. The sky over Charleston shimmered with a warm, southern haze, thick with humidity and whispers of history that clung to every brick wall and oak tree. Elijah Carter, age 72, stepped carefully along the edge of King Street, leaning slightly into his worn wooden cane. His gait was slow but not fragile, each step measured, steady, filled with the kind of quiet dignity earned only by surviving things others wouldn't dare imagine. His coat was old. The olive-drab army jacket, sun-faded and fraying at the cuffs, bore the emblems of wars long faded from America's collective memory. A faded American flag patch still clung to the right sleeve. Above his heart, the remains of a name tag, Carter, stitched in weathered black thread. He paused in front of a polished glass storefront, Lanway Bistro, one of Charleston's newest, trendiest restaurants. Inside, soft jazz played under golden lighting, and white linen tablecloths danced gently in the breeze of hidden ceiling fans. Couples sipped Chardonnay, forks clinked on porcelain, and the air carried the unspoken code of exclusivity. Elijah adjusted his coat, took a deep breath, and stepped inside. As he entered, the air changed. The soft murmur of conversation dimmed, like someone had turned the volume knob just a touch lower. Behind the hostess stand stood a young white woman, no older than 25, hair tied in a tight, sleek bun, eyes scanning Elijah with mechanical precision. She didn't smile. "Can I help you?" she asked, voice curt, neutral, like someone asking a stranger to explain themselves.
Elijah nodded gently.
"Yes, ma'am. Just looking for a seat for one." The hostess's brow twitched. "Are you sure you have the right place?" He tilted his head. "It's a restaurant, isn't it?" A silence hung between them, uncomfortable and prolonged. Behind Elijah, a family seated near the entrance shifted nervously. The father whispered something to his wife. She glanced toward Elijah, and then down at their son. The little boy looked up innocently and asked, just loudly enough to be heard, "Is he homeless?" Elijah heard it. He didn't flinch. Instead, he reached into his jacket pocket, pulling out an old leather wallet, smooth at the edges from decades of use. He flipped it open and slowly drew out a black and white photograph, a younger version of himself, sharp-eyed and lean, standing beside a chopper in Vietnam, helmet tucked under one arm, mud streaked across his boots. He held it out to the hostess. "This was me, once." She didn't take the photo. Instead, her eyes drifted past him. One moment. She disappeared around the corner. A minute later, a man emerged. White, mid-40s, slick hair, and a pressed vest. Jonathan Marrow, the manager. He walked with an air of practiced courtesy, but his smile was thin, manufactured. "Sir," he began, tone smooth as cold glass, "we do have a dress code here. Jacket and tie. We don't typically allow casual outerwear." Elijah raised a brow. "This jacket's older than this building." Marrow gave a chuckle that didn't reach his eyes. "I'm sure it is, sir. But we try to maintain a certain standard here." "I fought in this," Elijah replied, voice even. "Watched men die in it." Marrow folded his arms. "I understand, and I thank you for your service. But policy is policy." At the tables nearby, not a single patron spoke up. A woman stirred her iced tea slowly, her eyes fixed firmly on her drink. A man pretended to scroll his phone. Elijah looked around the room, seeing what he had seen so many times before. Polite avoidance. The performance of ignorance. He slowly tucked the photograph back into his wallet. No need to argue. No point in pleading. "Right," he said softly, turning toward the door. "Should have known better." The hostess exhaled faintly, already turning to reset the podium screen. Elijah walked back across the room, cane tapping against the hardwood floor, like a ticking clock. Just before he reached the exit, his reflection caught in the glass, old, black, bent but unbroken. The uniform may have faded, the medals may have rusted, but the man was still standing. Just as he reached for the door handle, something shifted behind him. At the bar, a man in a simple dark blazer and jeans had been watching the entire exchange. Mid-30s, broad-shouldered, quiet demeanor. Logan Pierce. He hadn't moved. Not until now. Logan straightened slowly, lowering his glass to the counter with surgical precision. His blue eyes narrowed, not in anger but in something colder. Recognition. He didn't say a word, just turned slightly and looked toward the manager. It was a stare that wasn't casual, wasn't polite. It carried weight. Memory. Jonathan Marrow paused mid-step as he returned to the host stand, catching Logan's eyes. He stopped short, blinking, uncertain. Logan didn't smile, didn't speak. But in that one silent glance, ice meeting ice, something passed between them. A shift in the room's energy. The clinking of forks slowed. Heads turned again. And then Logan stood. So did the man beside him. Then another. Until 5 others, each spaced around the room, unnoticed until now, rose from their seats in eerie synchronization. All of them carried the same calm intensity. All of them stared at the manager. Every eye in the restaurant was now on them. The silence deepened. Elijah, hand still on the door, paused. He looked over his shoulder, and for the first time, saw them. 6 men, silent, and standing as if summoned by history itself. One of them took a step forward and pulled something from his inner coat pocket. A folded, creased photograph. The same squad, the same war, and Elijah, front and center. The air outside Lanway Bistro had grown heavier, like it too had witnessed what just took place. The humidity clung tighter to Elijah Carter's skin as he walked down the front steps, cane clicking softly against the concrete. His shoulders were square, but his steps betrayed something deeper. Each movement carried the weight of memory, of battles long over yet still raging inside him. Behind him, the glass doors to the bistro closed with a sterile hush, shutting out the world he had just been dismissed from. Across the street, a massive screen on the side of a bank building played a muted broadcast. Veterans Day coverage. Red, white, and blue confetti rained over saluting soldiers in dress uniforms. A child held a cardboard sign, "My grandpa's a hero." Elijah paused, his eyes locked on the screen, not in pride, but in quiet mourning. His lips parted slightly. Something inside him stirred. Not patriotism, not nostalgia, but a question he could never shake. What did I fight for? Who did I really protect? The street was nearly empty. A car passed by, music thumping from the inside. Somewhere nearby, a dog barked, but it was the door behind him that opened again, followed by the sound of dress shoes briskly tapping on pavement. "Sir," came a voice. Elijah turned. Slowly. It was the man from the bar, the one who had stood up without a word, now outside the glow of the restaurant lights. His features were clearer. Logan Pierce, mid-30s, clean-shaven, angular jawline, eyes that had seen war and weren't finished processing it. He approached cautiously, his voice respectful, but uncertain. "You really served?" Elijah looked at him not with suspicion, but fatigue. There was a difference. "I did," he said after a pause. "Vietnam, 60. Logan's eyes widened slightly. "That's a long stretch." Elijah gave a faint grim smile. "The jungle don't keep time like we do." Silence lingered between them for a few seconds. Then Elijah added, "2 tours, Silver Star, Purple Heart, and a limp that never left." He tapped the cane gently on the ground. Logan nodded slowly, folding his arms. "My father was in Nam," said the jungle, "made boys old." Elijah let out a single breath. "Yeah." And the country they came back to made him bitter. He looked away, his voice suddenly sharper, brittle with memory. "I pulled a white sergeant out of a firefight, his legs blown open. He'd called me a jungle monkey 2 hours before. Didn't matter. I still carried him, still bled for him." Logan's jaw clenched. "They gave him a medal," Elijah continued. "They gave me paperwork. Said I was just doing my duty." Logan took a step closer, his voice softer now. "But that doesn't make sense. You saved someone. That's worth—" Elijah cut him off with a weary, quiet voice. "It's only worth something, if they believe you're someone." Their eyes locked. For a moment 2 generations of soldiers, one black, one white, stood under the same sky, bound not just by service but by scars no uniform could hide. "I'm sorry," Logan said finally. "For what it's worth." Elijah shook his head. "It ain't about sorry. It's about the silence. 40 years of being polite, while being erased." Logan stood still, absorbing the words like punches to the chest. He wanted to ask more, say more, But Elijah had already started walking again. Wait, Logan called after him. What's your name? Elijah Carter, he said without turning. And don't forget it. Most of the world already has. Then he disappeared into the city's heartbeat, his figure slowly swallowed by the distance, the cane tapping in sync with his quiet defiance. Logan watched until Elijah was no more than a silhouette, swallowed by shadow. Behind him, the lights of Landway Bistro glared like something artificial, something too clean. He turned slowly and walked back toward the entrance, but didn't go in. Instead, he stood just outside the large windows, watching through the glass. Inside, the manager, Jonathan Merrow, was still rattled, stiffly refolding a napkin, pretending to focus. But Logan's attention shifted to the table near the bar. 5 men were standing now. One by one, they pushed back their chairs. Not loudly, not theatrically, but with the kind of precision that spoke volumes. Their movements were quiet, deliberate. Each wore a civilian jacket, or blazer. But as they stood, something became visible. Embroidered patches, sewn into the lining, glinting briefly in the light. Not decorative, not for fashion. Each patch bore the unmistakable Navy SEAL trident insignia. A golden eagle clutching a trident, and a flintlock pistol over an anchor. One man, tall and bald, adjusted his cuff slightly to reveal a tattoo beneath. BODS 23-1, a known SEAL class number. The staff of the bistro froze, unsure what was happening. The room's energy shifted again. Something unscripted had entered the space. Merrow glanced up, and when his eyes met Logan's through the glass, he stiffened visibly. One of the men, the one with the tattoo, reached into his inner pocket and pulled out a photograph. It wasn't an iPhone snapshot. It was old, creased, yellowed at the edges. He laid it gently on the white tablecloth. In the photo, a group of soldiers in a jungle setting, faces dirtied, uniforms torn, exhaustion in their eyes, and standing dead center, gripping a wounded comrade by the shoulder, a much younger Elijah Carter. The manager blinked, unsure whether to approach. Another SEAL spoke softly, almost too low to hear. But the surrounding patrons caught the words like wind carries a whistle. That man saved Americans. Today, Americans let him walk out like trash. No one responded. No one moved. Outside, Logan placed his hand against the glass, as if feeling the heat of the room through the cold surface. His expression was unreadable, but his body stood rigid, as if something deep inside him had just shifted course forever. Inside the bistro, one of the SEALs reached for his phone, opened a group chat named Echo Unit, and typed just 2 words, "It's him." The tension in Landway Bistro no longer simmered. It had thickened into something denser, something that gripped throats and paralyzed tongues. Every fork had stilled. Every wine glass sat untouched. The 6 men, Logan Pierce and his silent unit, stood spaced evenly across the floor, like they'd rehearsed this choreography, not on a battlefield but in the marrow of their bones. They didn't speak. They didn't blink. They just walked. The soft clack of boots and shoes against tile echoed louder than it should have. Chairs creaked as patrons subtly leaned away, not quite sure what was unfolding. The silence in the room was no longer polite. It was a vacuum, threatening to implode under the weight of unspoken shame. Jonathan Merrow, the manager, stood behind the hostess podium, arms still awkwardly crossed. The fake smile from earlier now melted into confusion. He opened his mouth but nothing came out. His eyes flicked between the men approaching and the staff nearby, searching for cues, backup, anything. None came. Logan reached the podium first. He said nothing. Instead, he pulled a folded piece of cardstock from his jacket, unfolded it slowly, laid it on the wood like a challenge. It was a black and white photograph, creased at the corners and smudged with years of handling. The image was raw, mud-streaked soldiers, weapons slung carelessly over shoulders, sweat marks visible even in grayscale. Near the back, half-crouched, cradling a rifle and raising a slow, pained salute, was Elijah Carter, much younger but unmistakable, bandaged arm, bloodied shirt, defiant eyes. Jonathan stared at the photo as if it might burn him. "What is this?" "That," Logan said, voice quiet but taut, "is the man you turned away. The man you humiliated. The man who bled for this country while you were still trying to pass algebra." One of the other SEALs stepped closer. He was stockier than the rest, deep scar running across his temple. He looked like someone who hadn't smiled in 10 years. "He pulled me out of a kill zone. Baghdad. Yo 4. I never even learned his name until today." Jonathan's hands began to tremble. I didn't know. The youngest SEAL, barely over 30, stepped beside Logan. His jaw was clenched, hands behind his back in a familiar parade rest. No, Logan said coldly. You didn't care. There was no yelling, no grand gestures, just the weight of truth being laid bare without theatrics. A hush fell over the restaurant. And then, a tremor of guilt rippled through the room. The same family who had muttered earlier now stared at the photo. The father shifted uncomfortably in his seat. The mother's face had gone pale. The little boy, sensing something seismic had just happened, looked away from his iPad and whispered, "Is that really him?" Another diner, a middle-aged man in a business suit, cleared his throat, suddenly, very aware of the silence. He lowered his gaze. No one spoke. No one offered an apology. Not a single person said thank you. It was the youngest SEAL who finally turned toward the tables. He scanned the room, voice quiet but unshakably direct. "Any of y'all gonna say something?" he asked. The question wasn't rhetorical. It landed like a hammer. But still, nothing. A woman shifted in her seat and dropped her napkin. A man coughed. The silence remained their only answer. And then the twist came, not from the room, but from the outside. Because outside the large pane-glass windows, just beyond the patio railing, stood a young black teenager, no more than 17. Dreadlocks pulled back, earbuds dangling, an old iPhone gripped tightly in both hands. He had filmed the entire interaction from Elijah's entrance to the moment Logan laid down the photograph. He hadn't flinched. He hadn't interrupted. He just stood there, capturing it all with eerie steadiness. Inside the restaurant, no one had noticed him yet. But the light from his phone screen was visible now. Recording. Red dot blinking. Still lit. The SEALs hadn't seen him either, but one of them, an older black man in the group, caught the movement from the corner of his eye. He nudged Logan gently. Logan turned, spotted the boy, and walked to the window. He raised a hand, nodding once, not to shoo the kid away, but in acknowledgement, permission, solidarity. Outside, the teen lowered his phone slightly and mouthed, "They need to see this." Back inside, Jonathan Marrow was beginning to unravel. We can't just show up and embarrass my business like this," he stammered, voice rising slightly. The SEAL with the scar took a step forward, not menacing, just enough to force eye contact. "Embarrass? Sir, you did that all by yourself." A woman at one of the side tables finally whispered. "He was a veteran?" The youngest SEAL turned to her. "Still is," he replied. Her eyes welled up. Shame swirled in them. But she said nothing more. Logan looked back at the photo, still sitting on the podium. He picked it up, carefully folding it again like a relic. Then he leaned in close to the manager, voice so low only Jonathan could hear it. "You see his face? Next time you try to erase someone, make damn sure they didn't build the road you're standing on." Then he turned and walked away. The rest of the unit followed, quiet as shadows. Outside, the air was thick with tension, but Logan didn't speak. None of them did. They gathered briefly under the diner's awning. The boy with the phone walked over, reverently, showing Logan the screen. 2.3K people watching. He was streaming live. Logan nodded. "Keep it up." The boy didn't blink. They needed to see someone stand up. "We always get left sitting down." The SEAL with the body S tattoo put a hand on the kid's shoulder. "You did good, son." Meanwhile, back inside the diner, the mood had curdled. The staff had retreated into the kitchen. Jonathan looked around at the remaining diners, unsure whether to apologize, explain, or simply vanish. And then a notification buzzed on a young woman's phone at the nearest table. She looked down. Her eyes widened. "Oh my God," she whispered. She turned her screen toward her boyfriend. On it was the live stream, already being clipped, shared, and reacted to across platforms. The title read, "Black War Hero Kicked Out. Watch what these SEALs did next." Within seconds, another phone lit up, then another, and another. The bistro was no longer an elegant sanctuary. It was now a crime scene of silence, complicity, and exposure. But one person was no longer there.
Elijah Carter.
Gone. As if he'd vanished into the air itself. No one had seen where he went. Logan looked up the street, scanning. But as the stream played on another patron's phone, the last frame of Elijah walking away revealed something none of them expected. He had paused at a nearby bench, speaking to a woman in a military uniform, Who was she? By dawn, the echo of the silent protest inside Lanway Bistro had thundered across the internet. The sun hadn't yet touched the rooftops of Charleston, but the story had already caught fire like dry leaves in July. TikTok was first. An early screen recording from the teenager outside the window. Captioned, "This is what real honor looks like. Watch till the end." The video was just under a minute. Shaky and unfiltered. But what it lacked in polish it made up for in truth. Elijah's quiet rejection. Logan's silent stand. The photo placed like a final verdict. It struck a nerve. By 6 a.m., it had crossed 1 million views. By noon, it had crossed 6. Twitter grabbed it next. The hashtags exploded. Honor Elijah. Seal stand. He served 2. Charleston diner shame. Dozens of creators stitched the original video, reacting with outrage, sadness, disbelief. A few broke down crying mid-video. Others screamed into the camera. Some just stared in silence, shaking their heads. Instagram reels and Facebook groups soon followed. A prominent black historian tweeted, "Elijah Carter's story is not new, but it's finally being heard." News anchors debated it live. An American hero, turned away at the door. What does that say about who we value? The Charleston Tribune ran a front-page headline, "Veteran disrespected, nation responds." By evening, Lanway Bistro's Yelp rating had dropped from 4.8 stars to 1.9. The top review read simply, "You turned away a man who turned toward bullets for you." But not everyone was clapping. Beneath the outpouring of support came the undercurrent. Comments like, "Let's be honest. He looked homeless. This isn't racism, it's a business policy." The SEALs were out of line. You don't gang up on service staff. He should have worn something cleaner. Respect is earned. It was the old language, dressed in new phrasing. Modern racism had evolved. It didn't always shout. Sometimes it whispered, cloaked in etiquette, delivered with perfect spelling. Elijah Carter sat alone in his small one-bedroom apartment, on the city's edge, scrolling through it all, with a trembling hand. The light from the screen cast harsh shadows on the creases of his face. His walls were bare, save for 2 framed medals and an old calendar still flipped to May. He hadn't slept. He didn't know how to feel. All this attention after so many years of silence. It confused him. A part of him wanted to retreat. Another part, deep in his chest, began to stir like an old engine forced back to life. His phone buzzed again. Another notification. Another tag. His name, floating through a world he'd never joined voluntarily. He clicked on one video and saw his own face, pixelated and paused mid-turn from the bistro door. The voiceover said, "They say heroes wear capes. No. Sometimes they wear worn-out jackets and carry invisible scars." He closed the app. The knock came at 7:32. 3 sharp taps. Hesitant. Polite. He sat still for a moment, unsure if it was meant for him. Another knock, this time lighter. He stood slowly, cane steady, and opened the door. There stood Naomi Brooks, age 22, hair in tight curls, denim jacket covered in social justice pins. Her eyes burned with the righteous fire of someone who hadn't yet been broken by the world. "Mr. Carter?" she asked, breathless. He studied her a moment. "That's me. I don't work for anyone. I'm not with the news," she rushed to say. "I just needed to come. I run a community group. We saw the video. I saw you." She paused, reaching into her tote bag and pulling out a printed screenshot. The viral freeze frame of him walking away, shadowed by shame. "Elijah Carter," she said softly. "The world's watching. What do you want them to know?" He looked at her. Not through her. At her. It was a kind of silence that told her this moment was more than it seemed. He stepped back, motioned her inside. His apartment was sparse. An old recliner, a shelf with dusty VHS tapes, a photo of a woman in uniform, and a toddler boy beside her. Naomi scanned the room with reverence. "Is that your family?" "Was," he said simply. "My wife passed in '03. My son's out west. We talk sometimes." She nodded gently, letting the quiet hold. "I don't need pity," he said suddenly. "Don't want it either." "You're not getting pity, sir," Naomi replied. "You're getting presence. Your story matters." He sat down slowly, his eyes on the television, muted and still playing clips from the Veterans Day parade. Naomi sat across from him. "We're organizing a rally outside that diner. Peaceful. Powerful. People are coming from all over." He didn't answer right away. Then, with a slow breath, he leaned forward. His voice was soft, almost too soft. "Tell them I was never invisible," he whispered. "They just refused to see me." Naomi's eyes welled, but she held firm. "I will." She reached into her bag again, this time pulling out a classified document she'd obtained through her activist network. As she laid it on the table, she said, "Mr. Carter, I think they covered up more than just your presence in that restaurant." The first time Elijah Carter heard his name on national television, he was sitting in the same recliner he'd had since 1998. Its cushions worn thin, the leather cracked in lines that mapped the weight of every year past. The television, mounted precariously on a shaky old stand, flickered with the high-gloss energy of cable news. But the voice that spoke made the entire room still. "Today we remember the name Elijah Carter," said the CNN anchor, voice low and reverent. "A Vietnam War veteran denied service at a Charleston diner simply for existing in a body this country asked to die for." Elijah leaned forward, eyes narrowing. His breath slowed. On screen, they showed the now iconic image, his back turned to the camera, cane in hand, walking away from the door of Landway Bistro. Then the photo of him in uniform. Then, for the first time in decades, a clip of his Silver Star ceremony, retrieved from Department of Defense archives. MSNBC ran it next, followed by BET, The Griot, and then ABC Nightline. A firestorm of media attention surrounded his name, not out of scandal or sensationalism, but from the aching revelation of a forgotten truth. By week's end, Elijah Carter had become a household name across generations. Some spoke it with reverence, others with irritation, and a few in quiet corners of power with concern. A reporter on The View asked the panel, "When a black man serves and sacrifices but still gets treated like a threat, what hope do the rest of us have?" The question was rhetorical, the answer already known. At a White House press briefing, a journalist raised his hand. "Has the president seen the Elijah Carter video? And is the administration considering any form of federal recognition?" The press secretary adjusted her mic, measured her words. "I can confirm that the president has been briefed and deeply moved. There are early discussions around a symbolic gesture, perhaps something like an Elijah Carter Day, though nothing has been finalized." It was a soundbite. But for Elijah, sitting alone in his living room, with the blinds half shut, it felt surreal. He didn't want a day. He wanted a moment to breathe. That night, the letters started coming, dozens at first, then hundreds, piled into his mailbox, slipped under his door, even taped to the windshield of his old truck. Some handwritten, some typed. A few included medals of their own, strangers mailing their own Bronze Stars, or campaign ribbons to a real hero. But not every envelope carried gratitude. One white card had no return address, no name, just typed words. "You're not special, you're just loud." Another was scrawled in red ink. "You people always playing the victim." The attention was a double-edged spotlight. It illuminated and burned. Then came the offers. A major publishing house wanted to option his life story. A Hollywood producer floated a documentary proposal. "We'll bring in Denzel," the email read, as if the actor's name alone would buy Elijah's pass. He read the pitch, then quietly folded it in half and left it on the radiator. "I didn't do anything worth selling," he told Naomi. She, however, disagreed. Fiercely. Naomi had become both his fiercest defender and his accidental publicist. Within days of their meeting, she'd helped form a grassroots coalition called Carter's Echo, made up of veterans, college students, retired teachers, and artists. Their first mission, a town hall in Charleston titled "Black Veterans Are Not Ghosts." Flyers went up. Social media buzzed. Local politicians were invited, though few responded. The night of the event, the community center overflowed. Black veterans in worn caps lined the front row. Behind them sat their families, spouses and grandchildren, each clutching photos or dog tags. A mural had been painted on canvas for the occasion. Elijah, standing alone, shadowed by American flags tattered by time. Naomi took the podium first, her voice, clear and sharp, cut through the crowd. "America remembers its wars, but it forgets the black men who fought them." Elijah Carter was not invisible. He was just ignored. The applause was thunderous, but as the event gained momentum, so did resistance. Conservative pundits began to twist the narrative on national TV. "This isn't about race, it's about behavior," one declared. "A private business has the right to enforce dress codes. Why is this man being paraded like a martyr?" On Twitter, right-wing voices accused Elijah of staging the event. Fake vet. One post read. Didn't even show proof. Another. Funny how it's only black people claiming to be heroes lately. But Elijah didn't answer them. He didn't post a response, issue a rebuttal, or film a teary-eyed reaction. Instead, he chose one interview. One voice he trusted. Marcus Reeves, a former Marine turned investigative journalist for a prominent black news network, requested a sit-down. Marcus had served 2 tours in Afghanistan. He knew what the weight of war did to a man, and he understood the power of silence. Elijah agreed. They met at a small park near Elijah's home, beneath a creaking oak tree, where birds chirped like they hadn't read the news. Marcus adjusted his mic, nodded once. "Mr. Carter, thank you for being here. I don't do interviews," Elijah replied. "I know," Marcus said, "but I don't do lies." They spoke for over an hour about race, war, memory, and the quiet erosion of self-worth in a country that treated his body as useful but his presence as disposable. Toward the end, Marcus reached into his leather messenger bag and pulled out a folder. Its cover bore the emblem of the Department of Defense. "I wasn't supposed to get this," Marcus said carefully, "but someone in the archives owed me a favor." He opened it. Inside, a classified combat report from 1971. Vietnam? Elijah's name was listed clear and unredacted. But what stunned Elijah was the second name. Private William Granger. Marcus continued, reading aloud. During Operation Swift Wind, Sergeant Elijah Carter extracted and stabilized Pifey T. Granger, the only son of then-Senator Harold Granger, under heavy enemy fire. Medical evac was delayed. Without Sergeant Carter's intervention, Granger would not have survived. Elijah's mouth parted slightly, but no words came. "I thought they lost those records," he whispered. "They didn't lose them," Marcus said. "They buried them." Marcus flipped to the final page of the file, and there, in faint handwriting, was a note. "Do not elevate. Racial optics risk. Keep internal." Marcus looked up, his voice low. "They made sure you were erased. And the man you saved. He's now a senator." The words on the classified report echoed in Elijah's mind like a slow drumbeat. "Do not elevate. Racial optics risk. Keep internal." Each phrase, more damning than the last. He hadn't spoken for a full minute after Marcus Reeves revealed it. The park felt smaller. The air, tighter. The oak branches above seemed to curl inward, as if recoiling from the truth. Across from him, Marcus sat still, letting the silence do what it always did, amplify what was unbearable. "They knew," Elijah finally murmured. His voice had a fragile edge to it, not of weakness but restraint. "They knew what I did." "They knew," Marcus confirmed, gently closing the file. "And they didn't just ignore it," Elijah said. "They erased it." The name William Granger had long faded from Elijah's memory, like a scar that healed over until someone rips it open again. But now it all returned. The firelight in the jungle, the screams, the blood slicking his hands as he tied his own shirt around the young white soldier's gut. Elijah had dragged that boy back through mud and bullets. Not for recognition, not even for thanks, just because it was the right thing to do. And that boy, it turned out, had grown into Senator William Granger, now a wealthy, well-polished politician with presidential aspirations. He had never once spoken Elijah's name publicly, never acknowledged what had been done for him. The next day, the story broke wide. Cover-up? Black vet's heroism erased to protect white political future. Exclusive. Senator's life saved by soldier. He never mentioned. The man they erased. New files reveal racial bias in Vietnam-era honors. The leaked document had found its way into the hands of multiple outlets. First Marcus's network, then a cascade of digital newsrooms, independent journalists, even the Washington Post. And the timing? Explosive. Senator Granger was in the middle of a campaign tour, prepping for what insiders whispered was a potential 2028 White House run. He had built a reputation as a unifier, someone who had served by way of sacrifice and had overcome hardship. But no one had asked what kind of hardship. No one had looked into the day he nearly died in Vietnam. Until now, as the news spread, Granger clammed up. His office released a brief, stilted statement. "We respect all veterans, and any implication of dishonor is deeply troubling. At this time, we are reviewing the claims." No denial, no confirmation, just fog. The response wasn't enough. By noon, a protest formed outside Granger's Charleston estate. More than 100 people. Signs lifted high. "Say his name. Elijah Carter. 40 years of silence is complicity. Black valor isn't optional." The estate gates remained closed. Security paced behind them. Inside, Granger was said to be on calls with his team, trying to contain what many were already calling a legacy killer. But Elijah? He stayed home. Not because he didn't care, but because he was tired. Tired in his bones. The kind of tired that wasn't solved by sleep, but by peace, and he hadn't known that since he was 19. Naomi, on the other hand, was in overdrive. Phone buzzing every minute. Organizing interviews, live streams, rallies. She was a whirlwind of righteous fury and logistics. Elijah, you need to say something, she urged, pacing his apartment like a lawyer prepping a star witness. This is your moment. But he shook his head. No, this ain't my moment. It's our moment. For every man buried without credit. For every sister who wore that uniform and got called boy anyway. This ain't about me. She stopped pacing. Her eyes softened. But they're listening now. Finally, they're listening. He turned to her slowly, his voice even but pointed. Then don't waste the microphone on just one name. Make him say all of ours. She nodded, swallowing hard. That night, the rally continued. Bigger, louder. A makeshift stage was set up near the courthouse. Banners rippled in the wind. Local news crews filmed live. Drones buzzing overhead. Veterans spoke, men and women from multiple wars, multiple generations. And Elijah, cane in hand, walked up to the platform. He didn't use the mic at first. He just stood there. The crowd fell into reverent silence. Finally, he leaned into the mic. They tell you war changes you, he said. But they don't tell you what home will do. Applause. Cheers. But Elijah raised his hand, asking for quiet. I never wanted medals. Just a fair shot at being remembered. Not exalted, just seen. You can survive the jungle, the bombs, the blood and still lose to silence. Then, his voice cracked. But this ain't just my story. It's for James Henderson, who came home in a box with no ceremony. For Angela Miles, who was denied promotion because they said she didn't fit the image. For the thousands who came back and learned their skin still made him suspect. The crowd erupted. But before the moment could crest too high, a figure emerged from the crowd. A white man, mid-60s, thin, with silver hair and nervous energy in his walk. He stepped forward toward the stage. Security made a move, but Elijah held up his hand. The man stopped in front of him, trembling. He looked familiar. And then Elijah remembered. He had carried this man once too. Another soldier from another mission. Another moment. I remember you, Elijah said, narrowing his eyes. The man nodded. His lip trembled. I told them not to credit you, he whispered. Barely audible. The crowd stilled. You what? Naomi said, stepping forward. The man raised his hand, voice shaking. I was young, scared. They said if I spoke up I'd lose my discharge. I didn't know they'd erase you too. I swear I didn't know. Elijah's face remained unreadable. I watched that diner video, the man continued, and I couldn't live with myself anymore. I was a coward. Then he reached into his coat pocket and pulled out a worn bronze star. He placed it gently at Elijah's feet. You deserved this more than I ever did. Just as Elijah bent down to pick it up, a voice crackled through a police scanner nearby. Confirmed threat on Senator Granger's property, suspected arson. Naomi's head whipped toward the sound, eyes wide. They're trying to erase it all. Again. Elijah had never been fond of microphones, stages, or sudden gestures. But when the white man from the crowd knelt before him with trembling hands and placed the bronze star at his feet, the silence that followed was louder than any anthem. The air held its breath. He recognized the face now. Thomas Bell, a former corporal with a Spitfire temper and a southern accent thick as syrup. They'd served in the same unit during a bloody stretch of the Vietnam War. Elijah remembered Bell's disdain, his sideways glances, the way he used to avoid sharing a bunk, until the night a mortar shell left Bell screaming in a pit of blood and bone. Elijah had dragged him out that night, carried his half-shattered body on his back for nearly 400 yards under sniper fire. Bell never spoke of it again, until now. The aging man's shoulders shook. He stood slowly, hands still up, his eyes red and wet. I hated men like you back then, Bell admitted. Hated you for your skin, for the way you held your head high. I thought you were trying to be better than us. His voice cracked. I called you things I wouldn't write down, even now. I was ignorant. I was scared. But you never let it stop you from saving me. Elijah said nothing. Bell stepped forward, Voice barely audible. You taught me what a man really looks like. Not that day. Not in the jungle. But now, the way you've stood through all this, you saved me again. It wasn't rehearsed. It wasn't polished. And when Elijah opened his arms, and the two embraced, the crowd didn't cheer. They wept. Someone in the audience, a teenage girl, pulled out her phone and whispered to no one in particular. This is history. She pressed record. By morning, the footage had swept the digital world again. This time not through outrage, but catharsis, healing through truth. Elijah Carter, the man who carried a nation. Racism can be unlearned, if we're brave enough. Clips flooded TikTok, with veterans black, white, Latino posting tributes. A former sergeant in Detroit held up his own Bronze Star and said, "This is for Elijah now." A young black woman, recently discharged from the Navy, broke down as she read a poem written in Elijah's honor. Even national radio weighed in. NPR's morning broadcast called the moment one of the most vulnerable and honest reckonings between past hate and present growth that America has seen in real time. For a few hours, it felt like something might shift, but the backlash came fast. Too fast. Elijah's mailbox began receiving letters again. Only this time, not of support. The envelopes had no return addresses. Some were scrawled in red ink, others in block capital letters. One read, "You were better off invisible." Another, "Don't rewrite history. We know what you really are." A third arrived wrapped in newspaper with a dead rat inside. Naomi found it first. She was staying at Elijah's apartment more often now, sometimes sleeping on the couch with her laptop perched on her knees. She barely reacted anymore when the doorbell rang. But this one made her freeze. Her face turned stone. "We're installing security," she said flatly. "I've lived this long without cameras." Elijah muttered. She turned to him, fire in her eyes. "You didn't have thousands of angry strangers looking for your address before. Times changed. So does the defense." That evening, Logan Pierce showed up again, this time with a toolbox and two large boxes under his arms. Motion sensors, reinforced locks, a compact night vision camera. "Elijah," Logan said, without preamble, "you've protected this country enough. Let us protect you now." Elijah nodded quietly. He didn't want to make a fuss. But deep down he knew this was a different kind of battlefield. He tried not to let it show, but the damage was internal. He'd catch himself staring out the window too long. He'd stop mid-step, listening for something that wasn't there. And late one night, as Naomi dozed off during a Zoom call, Elijah sat across the room, hands folded over his cane, whispering to himself, "Am I healing a nation, or just exposing old wounds they'll never let close?" He hadn't meant to say it out loud, but Naomi stirred. She heard him, and instead of offering comfort, she spoke truth. Sometimes wounds don't close until they're lanced. It's supposed to hurt. That's how you know it's working. Elijah nodded faintly. But the doubt lingered, like an ache in old bones. The next day felt quiet. Too quiet. A stillness that felt like the calm before something cruel. At dusk, Elijah turned off the porch light and sat at his kitchen table, sipping tea. Naomi was reviewing hate mail and tracking IP addresses on her laptop. Logan had left an hour earlier but promised to swing by in the morning. The air buzzed with stillness. Then, crash. A violent shatter exploded through the living room window. Glass flew across the carpet like thrown confetti made of razors. Naomi screamed, ducking instinctively. Elijah turned, heart hammering. Lying on the floor amid the shards was a brick, wrapped in something. He moved toward it carefully, stepping over glass. Naomi grabbed her phone, already dialing. Elijah leaned down, trembling fingers unfolding the cloth around the brick. It was an American flag, not new, old, burnt at the edges, tattered. Inside, tucked with the flag, was a single typed note. "You didn't die when you should have. Now watch what happens next." Elijah said nothing, just stared. Not in fear, not in anger, but in the kind of hollow sorrow that only comes when you realize even your blood isn't enough for some people. Naomi stood beside him, phone still at her ear. Her voice was calm now, resolved. "Yes, we need police, but we need something else too," she said into the receiver. She looked at Elijah. "We need the world to see this." Across town, security footage from Senator Granger's estate leaked online, showing a man in uniform setting fire to confidential documents inside his garage. The footage zooms in, and the patch on his sleeve reads Capital Internal Affairs. The broken window had been cleaned, the glass vacuumed from the carpet, and the scorched flag bagged for evidence. But the damage went far beyond shards and ash. Something had shattered deeper, an invisible line between survival and fear. The police arrived late and left early. 2 uniformed officers took statements, asked routine questions, then handed Naomi a case number and muttered, "Let us know if anything else happens." No patrol, no follow-up, no promises. Elijah knew what it meant. They weren't protecting him. They were protecting a system that found his survival inconvenient. Naomi was livid. She wanted him off the grid. "You've done more than enough," she said. "Let someone else carry it for a while. Just a few weeks. Let it breathe." But Elijah, sitting beneath a window now covered in plywood, shook his head. "I'm not dying in the dark," he said. "I've done that already. I was invisible long enough." His voice was steady. It scared her more than yelling would have. "I've seen men rot with silence in their chest," he added. "Not again. Not me." Still, Naomi persisted. She called a retired FBI contact, someone she trusted, and asked if they could provide protection, even off the books. What she got was a quiet warning. "If he stays public, we can't guarantee anything. There's chatter online. It's ugly. Organized." Naomi didn't share the full warning with Elijah. But his intuition didn't need help. He already knew. That's why, days later, when the Veteran Unity March was announced downtown, Elijah insisted on attending. "I don't need bodyguards," he said. "I need witnesses." Naomi tried again. "The FBI literally said they can't guarantee your safety." Elijah met her gaze. "Wasn't guaranteed in Nam either. Never stopped me then." He wore his same olive drab jacket, the same boots, the same determination stitched into every movement. The march began at City Hall and ended at Liberty Square, beneath the looming shadows of a Confederate monument that protesters had long fought to remove. Thousands gathered. Veterans in uniform, students in hoodies, grandmothers holding signs that read, "Black Valor built this country." News vans lined the streets. Helicopters hovered overhead. Elijah arrived in a battered pickup truck. He stepped out slowly, helped by Logan and Naomi, the cane still his anchor. But his posture, upright, unbroken, spoke louder than any flag. When he took the stage, the air shifted. A collective stillness. Not the silence of apathy, but the stillness that precedes transformation. The microphone crackled. "I was 19 when I first wore this jacket," Elijah began. "My skin was young, but my country was old in its hatred." The crowd leaned in. "They sent me to fight for freedom, to carry rifles and risk blood. But when I came back, when I stepped off that bus, they gave me chains. Not iron, not shackles, but chains made of indifference." A murmur swept through the crowd. A woman wiped her eyes. "They didn't spit on me. They just never looked at me. Like I'd survived the wrong war in the wrong body." Applause surged, not polite, but defiant. Elijah raised his hand gently. "I stood silent for years. I thought that was dignity. I thought that was strength. But silence is just a grave with no headstone." Roars now. Signs lifted higher. Phone cameras recording. And now when I finally speak, they throw bricks through my window. Wrap hate in flags. Call me un-American. Because I dare to be seen. His voice grew sharper, like tempered steel. "I won't hide. I won't shut up. If my truth threatens their comfort, maybe their comfort was built on my erasure." It happened fast. Mid-sentence, Elijah's voice caught. He blinked, wobbled slightly. Naomi was at his side before the mic hit the ground. "Elijah," she shouted, touching his shoulder. He staggered, grabbing at his chest. The world spun sideways. Logan leapt on stage, wrapping an arm around his waist. The crowd froze in collective horror as Elijah collapsed to his knees, the cane clattering beside him. Paramedics were already moving. Security formed a circle. Live TV didn't cut away. Anchors fumbled to narrate what they didn't yet understand. An ambulance screamed through the square as Elijah was lifted onto a stretcher. Oxygen mask. Wires. Silent prayers. Inside the van, Naomi gripped his hand. "Stay with me, Mr. Carter. You hear me? Don't you dare check out." His eyes fluttered but stayed open. The hospital ER was a blur of lights and machines. Monitors beeped. A nurse whispered terms Naomi didn't recognize. Logan paced the hallway like a storm cloud. Fists clenched, jaw tight. A doctor finally emerged, his face neutral but not grave. Stress-induced cardiac arrhythmia, he said. We stabilized him, but it was close. Naomi exhaled for the first time in hours. He's lucky, the doctor added. A few more minutes and we'd be having a different conversation. She nodded, still stunned. Can we see him? In a bit. He's resting. Logan walked away, needing air. He passed nurses, a soldier in a wheelchair, a mother holding a child. In the waiting room, a chair creaked. A man rose, quiet as breath. He was middle-aged, unshaven, eyes clouded with something unreadable. He didn't look like a journalist or protester, just present. He held out a small envelope. You with Mr. Carter? He asked Logan. Logan paused. Who's asking? The man just extended the envelope further. Just make sure he gets this. It's time. And then he turned, disappearing down the corridor like a ghost who knew his haunting was done. Logan opened the envelope. Inside was a typed letter, the edges crisp. No return address, no signature, just 6 lines. They buried the truth because it didn't fit their story. They erased his name because it scared them. But the files weren't all destroyed. Check the red cabinet in room 307, Archives East Wing. Password SwiftWind 7. It's all still there. For now. Logan stared at the letter, heart racing, because room 37 was the restricted wing of the Capitol's Federal Archive building, and SwiftWind was the name of the operation that Elijah had never spoken of. The envelope was pale yellow, the kind that hadn't been used since fax machines were still relevant. It bore no stamp, no address, only a black wax seal, marked with the initials WG, beneath a faded Senate insignia. William Granger. Logan stared at it for a long minute in the hospital waiting room, the letter still in hand from the stranger who had vanished into the sterile corridors. His hands itched to tear it open, but something instinct, maybe reverence, told him to wait. He walked back to Naomi, who was seated at Elijah's bedside. Machines beeped in rhythmic steadiness beside her, soft and constant. Elijah's face was pale, still, his chest rising only slightly under the hospital blanket. Naomi looked up. You okay? Logan held up the envelope. I don't think this was meant for me, but it's for him. He handed it over. Naomi's fingers trembled as she peeled the seal and unfolded the letter. It was handwritten, shaky, and uneven, as though the writer's strength was slipping with every line. The ink was smudged in places, but the meaning was carved clear. Elijah, this letter comes too late. Like everything else I owe you. You saved my son in a jungle where no one else would lift a hand. He was bleeding out. You didn't hesitate, but I did. When I was briefed on the after-action report and saw your name listed as the rescuer, I froze. You were black. You were enlisted. My son was white, an officer's child. The optics, they said, would complicate things. I said nothing. Worse, I signed the recommendation to withhold your Medal of Honor. I have lived decades with that silence, and now I'm dying with it. I am sorry, but I know that isn't enough. Senator William Granger. Naomi dropped her hand to her lap. Her eyes didn't blink. The room felt colder than before. Logan paced. This is everything. Proof. A confession. From the man himself. He's dying, Naomi whispered. He wants to cleanse his conscience before the grave swallows it. Logan shook his head, rage bleeding into his tone. He got decades of power, prestige, and peace. Elijah got silence and a shattered heart. Naomi looked at the letter again, her voice sharper now. We can't sit on this. If this gets out, the public will finally understand the scope. This wasn't just racial bias. It was deliberate theft. But he's in ICU, Logan cautioned. If this blows up and someone retaliates again. Naomi stood, fire in her chest. And if we stay quiet, it happens again anyway. Another black soldier's name gets erased for the comfort of white history. A silence stretched between them. Then Logan nodded. Then we leak it. Anonymously, but with credibility. They scanned the letter, blurred out Elijah's name for safety, then sent a high-res copy to a trusted journalist Naomi had worked with before, a black woman named Imani Price at the Current. No frills, no contact info, just the file. Subject line. You'll know what this is. It took 2 hours. Then the headline landed like a meteor. Exclusive: Dying Senator confesses to blocking Medal of Honor for Black Hero. Subhead: The optics didn't fit, says Granger in letter to Vietnam veteran Elijah Carter. By midnight, the story had broken every barrier. Cable news plastered it on loop. And medal theft trended worldwide. Talk show hosts raged, veterans groups issued statements, and historians went digging for similar cases. The nation reeled. Some demanded Granger be stripped of his honors, posthumously. Others said it was too late, that atonement matters. But under the noise, under the spin, one truth had finally cut through. Elijah Carter had been robbed. Naomi sat quietly in the hospital room the next morning, the news playing softly from a tablet beside Elijah's bed. Logan leaned against the wall, arms folded, watching the world spiral outside their bubble. Then Elijah stirred. It was subtle at first. A flutter of the fingers, a twitch in his brow. Naomi leaned forward, hope catching in her throat. "Mr. Carter?" His eyes opened slowly. She smiled. "You're back." He blinked, dazed, then saw the tablet screen, his own face beside the headline in bold letters. What is that?" he croaked. Naomi touched his hand gently. "The truth. It's finally out." Elijah read slowly, lips moving as he parsed the headline. His breathing grew heavier. His eyes welled, not from rage or vindication, but from something deeper. Not victory, not validation, loss. "I never wanted a medal," he said hoarsely. "I just wanted to be counted." And then the tears came. Silent, unforced, not of weakness but of grief. Of decades weighed down by erasure, finally being named. "I could have helped others. Been a leader. Maybe taught something," he whispered. "They stole not just the medal, they stole my voice." Naomi wiped her eyes. "You're speaking now, Elijah." Loud as ever. He smiled faintly. "Yeah, but it took a whole damn nation to hear me." In the hallway, Logan's phone buzzed. Unknown number. He stepped outside to answer. "Yeah." A clipped official voice responded. "This is Colonel Myra Hastings, Pentagon. We need to speak with Naomi Brooks. Urgently. Top clearance." Logan stiffened. "What is this regarding?" "It's about Elijah Carter, and an overdue offer we've been ordered to finally make." Inside the hospital room, Naomi's phone lit up with a message she didn't expect from a private military account. It read, "The files are moving. If you want them safe, come now. Room 37 won't stay open much longer." The call came at 6:17 a.m., the kind of hour that made everything feel like a secret. Naomi had just set down her second cup of hospital coffee when her phone buzzed again. This time not a message, but a direct call. "Pentagon. Secure line," glared across the screen. She answered quickly, stepping into the hallway. "Naomi Brooks." A voice, crisp and female, spoke without ceremony. "Miss Brooks, this is Colonel Myra Hastings. I'm calling to confirm that you are in possession of Senator Granger's letter, and that you've been representing Mr. Elijah Carter in recent public communications." Naomi's chest tightened. "Yes, that's correct. We're prepared to offer Mr. Carter the Medal of Honor, full reinstatement, formal apology, official recognition of his heroic action during Operation Swift Wind." Naomi blinked. 50 years later, there was a pause. "We want to right the wrong," Hastings said, "but it comes with conditions." Naomi's voice turned cold. "Of course it does." The colonel continued. "Mr. Carter must sign an NDA. No legal action against the Department of Defense. No further interviews referencing the cover-up, the racial suppression, or the senator. The ceremony will focus solely on his service. Nothing more." It was the oldest trick in the institution's book. Recognition in exchange for silence. Naomi ended the call without replying. Inside the hospital room, Elijah was awake, propped up by pillows, flipping channels slowly with the remote like he was trying to find a world that fit him. Logan sat nearby, skimming headlines. Naomi entered and didn't sit. "They offered it," she said. Elijah didn't ask what. He already knew. "The medal." "Yes, but there's a cost." He nodded. "They want silence. No lawsuits. No more truth." The room was quiet except for the beeping of Elijah's heart monitor. Logan sat forward. "You don't have to take it, Elijah. They want a photo op, not justice." Naomi's jaw clenched. "It's hush money with ribbons." Elijah turned off the TV. The silence that followed was heavier than any broadcast. "I fought for a country that told me I didn't belong," he said. "They gave other men medals, folded flags, legacies." He paused, voice softening. "I was never chasing medals. I was chasing memory, trying not to be erased." Naomi sat on the bed's edge, her voice tender but fierce. "Then don't let them use you to close the book while the pages are still soaked in truth." Elijah looked at them both, then out the window. I'll take the medal, he said slowly. Naomi's lips parted in protest, but he raised his hand. I'll take it. Because it's not just mine anymore. It's for every brother and sister they buried without names. Every story they scrubbed out. I'll wear it for them. He met Naomi's gaze with steel in his eyes. But I'll speak anyway. Naomi exhaled, her resistance melting into respect. 3 days later, the White House announced a special, nationally televised Medal of Honor ceremony for a long-overlooked American hero. Networks scrambled to cover it. Media invitations went out. Camera trucks lined up like it was the Super Bowl of redemption. The East Room of the White House gleamed under chandelier light. Every chair was filled. Military brass in uniform. Political leaders in pressed suits. Rows of veterans, some teary-eyed, some tense. At the front stood a polished wooden podium, and beside it, a velvet stand with the Medal of Honor, shining in its pale blue ribbon, the highest military decoration. Elijah entered in full dress uniform. It hadn't fit him perfectly in years, but he wore it like armor. The announcer's voice rang through the room. Today we recognize Sergeant Elijah D. Carter, a man whose valor was nearly erased. A man forgotten by history, now reclaimed by it. Thunderous applause. Cameras flashed. Naomi stood near the front, her hands clenched in pride and fury. The president stepped forward, placing the medal gently around Elijah's neck, a seal of legitimacy, 5 decades too late. As the medal settled against his chest, Elijah stepped to the mic. He was supposed to read the prepared remarks. He didn't. I was 23 when I saved a man who never said my name again. He began. The room stiffened. I was 23 when they decided my black skin complicated their narrative of heroism. A murmur. Chairs shifted. They denied me this medal not because I lacked bravery, but because I didn't fit their script. He paused. And yet here I stand. Not as their exception, but as their consequence. A burst of applause started, then faltered. Not everyone knew what to do with honesty so sharp. Logan nodded subtly from his seat. Naomi wiped a tear from her cheek. Elijah continued. They told me to be silent, but silence is what buried too many like me. I will not be their quiet. Then from the back of the room, a voice pierced the calm. You don't deserve it. Everyone turned. A man in civilian clothes, white, late 50s, red-faced, stood with clenched fists. You dishonor this ceremony. You dishonor real heroes. Secret Service moved swiftly. But Elijah raised his hand again. Let him speak, he said calmly. The man was trembling. My father died in Vietnam. He never got a medal. He never asked for one. You made this political. Elijah stepped down from the podium, the medal gleaming against his chest. I don't blame your father, he said, but I do blame a system that made men like him invisible, just like me. We're not enemies. We were all used. The room held its breath. The man faltered, tears forming. His hand dropped. Security escorted him out gently. But the interruption had changed the air. Elijah returned to the mic. That man, he carries what many carry. Pain twisted into anger. But I've carried mine longer, and today I carry it visible. He paused, scanning the crowd. I accept this medal. But not for silence. Not for unity built on denial. I accept it as a scar, visible, painful, and unapologetically black. As the ceremony concluded, Naomi's phone vibrated again. This time the message was chilling. A photo room 37's cabinet, emptied. Beneath it, a note written in Sharpie. You were too late. The applause from Elijah's speech still echoed faintly across the White House ballroom. Raw, unfiltered, not rehearsed applause, but the kind that cracked through decorum like a thunderclap through a church window. Elijah had descended from the stage with quiet dignity, the Medal of Honor resting heavily against his chest, not as an ornament, but as a truth long denied. He stood quietly among a small circle of veterans and dignitaries, hands clasped behind his back, face unreadable. The storm, he hoped, had passed, but the storm had only paused to reload. From the rear of the room, a chair scraped back, firm, loud, aggressive, a white man in a navy jacket, mid-50s, face flushed, eyes narrowed into heat. Derek Monroe, a former Marine and an outspoken critic of the politicization of military honors, as he often wrote on fringe forums and blog sites. He shouted, loud enough for the room to fall into a stunned hush. You don't deserve that medal. Elijah turned slowly. Monroe took a step forward, jabbing a finger through the air. I served in Nam. I've read every unit log. I never once saw your name, old man. The room froze. Half the audience had risen to their feet, unsure if it was in solidarity or reflex. Naomi instinctively moved toward Elijah. Logan and two other Navy SEALs from Elijah's former support team emerged from the crowd, like shadows turning to steel. Security started moving, but Elijah raised a hand. Calm, steady. Monroe wasn't done. "You're nothing but a political prop," he spat. "A token they dragged out to check boxes. I bled for this country. You just posed for sympathy." Logan broke rank first, stepping between Monroe and Elijah.
You want to question someone's service?
Logan said, voice ice cold. "You're looking at a man who took shrapnel for a unit he wasn't even assigned to. I've seen the photos. I've read the reports. He pulled men out of fire while your type was busy writing letters home about how much you missed normal." Monroe scoffed. "You don't know what I saw." Another SEAL stepped up. "But we know what he saw, because we served with the ones who told us. Men who carried their trauma back in silence, whispering Elijah Carter's name like a ghost that saved them." The crowd murmured now, some nodding, others shaking their heads, torn between disbelief and clarity. Monroe turned, trying to rally support. "You all buying this fairy tale? You letting this myth rewrite what honor means?" From the front row, an elderly black woman stood slowly, her church hat trembling slightly on her head. "My brother was in Elijah's unit," she said. "He didn't come home, but he wrote letters. And those letters talked about a man who never raised his voice but saved lives. That man was Elijah Carter." A silence followed. This one different. Final. Monroe suddenly looked small. Security took their cue, gently but firmly escorting him toward the exit. As he passed Elijah, he muttered, "This isn't over." Elijah didn't respond. He didn't need to. He stepped back up to the podium, adjusting the mic as the ballroom held its collective breath. "No," he said slowly, voice thick with tired fire. "It's not over." He leaned in. "Racism doesn't need a hood anymore," he said. "It wears suits now. It has email signatures. It has medals of its own." The room exploded in applause. No hesitation this time. Even Secret Service agents stood straighter. Elijah didn't smile. He didn't bow. He simply nodded once, stepped down and walked to his seat as if the air hadn't just shifted again around history. That night Elijah returned home, quietly, discreetly. No press, no cameras. Naomi stayed back in D.C. to handle media fallout. Logan walked Elijah to his front door, both of them too tired for words. The street was calm, the porch lights humming low. The air smelled like pine and late summer. As Elijah reached for his key, he noticed a small package resting neatly against the door. No postage, no label, just a small white box wrapped in brown string. He opened it carefully. Inside, beneath a thin sheet of tissue paper, was a child's drawing. Crayons on construction paper. Simple, honest. It showed Elijah in uniform, his face drawn with careful lines, the Medal of Honor colored gold on his chest. Behind him stood 6 faceless shadows, his SEAL support team. Above him, in big block letters, "My hero." His hand trembled. Logan looked over his shoulder. And then Elijah saw it. The signature at the bottom corner. Tyler, age 9. It was the same boy. The same one who had whispered in the diner all those weeks ago. Is he homeless? That boy had watched him leave in silence that day. And now, he saw him. Elijah leaned against the doorframe, overwhelmed by the smallest, purest validation of them all. Not from the Pentagon, not from politicians or generals, but from a child whose mind had been changed, not by force but by truth made visible. He didn't cry. He just whispered. "Took you long enough." Inside, he placed the drawing on the wall, right above his medals, right beneath the photo of his wife. He stood there, staring, as if seeing the final piece fall into place. But peace was not a permanent guest, because just as Logan turned to leave, Naomi's voice rang through on his phone, urgent and sharp. "Logan, are you with him?" "Yeah, why?" There was static. Then, "The files are gone. Room 307 was cleared out. There's nothing left but a note." Logan's voice dropped. "What kind of note?" A pause. Then, "You were too late." Logan looked at Elijah. "They're covering tracks. Fast." Elijah nodded slowly. "Then we dig faster." But what none of them saw just across the street, parked in silence, was a black SUV with government plates. Watching, waiting, recording. The front of Lanway Bistro looked different now. Gone were the sleek gold letters that once gleamed like exclusion. The windows were no longer tinted, but clear, letting in light, visibility, and the possibility of truth. A modest chalkboard stood outside the door, its cursive handwritten, "Veterans eat free, especially those history forgot." Inside, the hardwood floors remained, but nearly everything else had changed. The new owner, a black woman named Carla Denton, daughter of a Tuskegee airman, had taken over after the backlash forced the previous management into permanent retreat. She didn't want to turn the space into a museum of guilt. She wanted it to become something else, a place where truth could be seated, served, and heard. Lining the walls were black and white portraits of black veterans, not just famous generals but rank-and-file soldiers, nurses, radio operators, cooks, faces that had long gone uncelebrated, now watched over the diners, their eyes soft but unsparing. Elijah entered slowly, his cane tapping against the now scuffed floor, Naomi and Logan flanking him like anchors. He wore his olive jacket again, its fabric more fragile than ever, but worn with defiance. His Medal of Honor was tucked away, not visible. He hadn't come here to flaunt it. He had come to close a loop. Carla greeted him at the door. She didn't speak at first, just reached out her hand and gripped his with both of hers. A silent thank you exchanged in the grip alone. A corner table had been reserved. Fresh flowers, no cameras. Elijah sat down slowly. And then they entered, a young white couple, visibly nervous, their little boy walking between them, holding a small folder. His blonde hair was neatly combed, and he clutched the folder to his chest like it held something sacred. It was Tyler, the same boy from that first humiliating day, the same child who had once whispered if Elijah was homeless, and later had drawn him as a hero. The boy's parents approached tentatively. We wanted to say something in person," the father said, voice low. "That day, we failed. We didn't speak. We didn't teach him what we should have." The mother's eyes filled. "We're sorry, Mr. Carter." Tyler stepped forward and handed Elijah the folder. "I drew another one." Elijah opened it. This one was colored brighter than the first. It showed Elijah standing beneath an American flag, but the flag wasn't pristine. It was tattered, weathered, but still raised. Around Elijah were children of all races, holding signs that read, "I see you, and thank you." Above, in Tyler's blocky print, "Real heroes make us look again." Elijah's throat tightened. He looked at the boy, then at his parents. "Children don't hate," he said quietly. "They learn it. From what we allow, from what we excuse, from what we don't say." The mother nodded tearfully. Elijah patted Tyler's head gently. "But you're learning different now." Tyler beamed. That drawing would later become the official logo of a new foundation. Naomi helped launch, inspired by that moment. They called it Carter's Call, a nonprofit dedicated to recording and honoring the erased and unspoken legacies of Black veterans. Naomi handled operations. Logan led security and outreach. Elijah? He became the reluctant figurehead, the face of reclamation in a country that had long weaponized invisibility. Within weeks, donations poured in. Schools requested Elijah to speak at assemblies. Colleges invited him to keynote Black History Month. Entire classrooms across the country studied his story, using it as a starting point to examine the quiet systems that made his erasure possible. One day, a letter arrived from a school in Des Moines. A second grader had written in careful handwriting, "Mr. Carter, my daddy's in the Army. He says you're a soldier of truth. I want to be like you, even if I never go to war." The foundation created an online archive. Veterans submitted their photos, their stories, their scars. A forgotten grave in Alabama was given a new headstone. A woman in Baltimore found her grandfather's name, finally added to a unit roster after 60 years. The quiet began to speak. Elijah, however, remained cautious about fame. "They love you once you survive their neglect," he told Naomi. "But they still control the mic." Naomi agreed. But she also knew that power could be shifted if the right story reached the right lens. And one afternoon, as Elijah rested on his porch with a newspaper on his lap and a warm breeze in the air, Naomi's phone rang again. She stepped away to answer. Her voice returned quicker than usual, breathless with disbelief. "Elijah," she called from the sidewalk. "You need to hear this." He turned his head. She held up the phone. "It's Netflix." Elijah blinked. "They want to option your life story," she said. "They've read the coverage, watched the footage. They said it's cinematic." Elijah chuckled softly. I suppose surviving this long makes me good for the screen. They want to do it right, Naomi continued. Authentic, unfiltered. They said no white saviors, no edits, just your truth. He looked out over the porch rail, toward the horizon.
I ain't Hollywood, he muttered.
But you are history, Naomi replied. He was quiet for a moment, then asked, will they let me name it? Naomi raised a brow. What would you call it? Elijah smiled. The day they tried to erase me. She nodded. They'll call back. But just as she sat beside him, her phone buzzed again, this time not a call. A message, from an anonymous source. It read, before you sell the story, make sure you own the ending. They're not done scrubbing the past. Attached was a still image from a security cam. Room 3. The filing cabinet door reopened. In the photo's reflection, Naomi spotted a figure she hadn't seen in months. Senator Granger's chief of staff, wearing gloves, removing something from a hidden compartment. And beneath the drawer, a second letter. The meeting room was all glass, an artificial charm. Downtown Los Angeles pulsed just beyond the windows, casting reflections onto the sleek marble table where Elijah sat, uncomfortable, overdressed in his pressed flannel and veteran's cap, cane propped beside his chair like an afterthought. Across from him, two producers in $1,000 shoes smiled like politicians trying to convince a war hero that his own truth needed edits. So one began, adjusting his tie. We really see this story as an American comeback tale. You know, a narrative about unity, second chances, redemption, of course. The second producer nodded vigorously. We're thinking Glory meets Forrest Gump, but with a modern twist. Maybe start with the Medal of Honor ceremony, and flash back from there. Bookend the emotional stuff. Elijah didn't speak. Naomi leaned forward cautiously. What about the diner? The brick? The leaked letter? The cover-up? The first producer chuckled. Great tension beats. But maybe we soften those a bit. Let's not alienate audiences. The race stuff, well, it's there, obviously, but we want to focus on the universal heroism. Elijah raised his eyebrows. Universal, he echoed. Exactly, the second producer beamed. We're talking Americana, strength, overcoming adversity. We don't want to dwell too much on blame. Elijah stood slowly. The room grew quiet. If you can't tell it raw, he said, voice calm but final, don't tell it at all. The silence after that wasn't awkward. It was defeated, because no amount of camera angles could fake the authority in his voice. He turned to Naomi. We're done here. They walked out, leaving the script notes and pitch decks behind like discarded apologies. Back in Charleston, Naomi vented as they walked along the waterfront. They want your life, but they don't want your truth. Elijah chuckled. Ain't that America? The next day, 3 other production offers pulled out. By Friday, only one small company remained. And even they asked if he'd be open to a narrator character to explain the trauma more palatably. Naomi was livid. They want to serve your story with a spoonful of sugar. Elijah didn't flinch. Then maybe it's time we stop asking for a table. That night, as the city quieted and the moon cast long shadows over Elijah's porch, Logan made a suggestion. We do it ourselves. Naomi blinked. What do you mean? A doc, he said. Raw, ground level, no studios, just us, the story, and the truth. Elijah looked at him. We got 2 cameras between us, and no budget. Logan shrugged. We've got you. That's enough. Naomi nodded slowly. Kickstarter? Kickstarter, Logan confirmed. They launched the campaign under the name Carter's Truth. The pitch video was simple. Elijah, sitting in his living room, surrounded by photographs of soldiers long forgotten, with his hands folded quietly. My name is Elijah Carter, he said. I served this country. It forgot me. Now I want to remember the ones it erased beside me. No music. No filters. Within 48 hours the campaign exploded. $20,000 became $250,000 in a week. Messages poured in. My father served with Elijah. My grandmother was denied her uniform. We see you now. We're sorry it took so long. Local businesses donated gear. A small studio offered editing space. Young black filmmakers from Howard University asked to volunteer. Naomi handled production. Logan managed security and logistics. Elijah told his story and let others tell theirs. The camera followed him everywhere. Back to the fields where he once trained, to the grave of a forgotten friend in Alabama, to the street where he was turned away not for being impolite, but but for being unseen. They filmed the cracks and bruises of the past, the silence that followed it, and the fire that burned despite it all. It wasn't just about Elijah. It was about the silence he broke for a generation who had been told to hold it in. Months into production, the team gathered in the editing room, a windowless space above an old record store, laptops open, soundboards blinking. Naomi was reviewing footage from the diner, clips from Tyler's phone, interviews with former staff, archived security footage they had obtained through a reluctant whistleblower. Then she froze. "Logan," she said. "Come here." He leaned over her shoulder. On the screen, the original security cam feed from the day Elijah had been turned away. The manager, the hostess, and behind them, clearly visible on the monitor, a laughing server making a mocking salute, mimicking Elijah's war injury. Naomi scrubbed forward. The manager leaned into the camera, and though the audio was off, his lips clearly mouthed the words.
Make it look like he walked out.
Logan's face tightened. They lied. They said he got angry. They said he left. Naomi hit save. "We used this. We put this in the doc." Elijah entered the room, eyes tired, shoulders bent but unbroken. "What I miss?" he asked. Naomi turned the screen toward him. For a moment, he just stared. Not with shock, not with rage, with clarity. "They wanted to break me with silence," he said. "Didn't work." Then he looked at Naomi. "Put it all in. Every minute. Let them see what they made invisible." As Naomi uploaded the clip, her screen blinked. An anonymous message appeared. "You're not the only one with footage. Room 307 had a camera too, and you missed something." Attached, a single frame showing Senator Granger shaking hands with a man in uniform, wearing no name tag, but bearing a Pentagon pass. The clip was only 38 seconds long. Silent, grainy, black and white. But it was enough to crack the glass on a nation's already fractured conscience. The original security footage from Lanway Bistro, long thought wiped or accidentally lost, showed exactly what Elijah and everyone around him had said all along. And worse, Naomi had debated including it in the final cut of the documentary. Not because it lacked power, but because it might be too raw. On screen, Elijah stood politely at the hostess stand, his army jacket buttoned, posture calm. The manager waved him off without a glance. The hostess rolled her eyes, and just behind them in the kitchen window, two staffers laughed, one of them mocking a limp as he exaggerated, a military salute, drawing raucous giggles from the others. Then the manager turned toward the camera, muttered something, lips easily readable, and mouthed the words, "Just say he got hostile." There was no ambiguity, no missing context. Only truth, caught by a lens they thought no one would find. Naomi spliced it into the middle of the film, not with narration, not with music, just 38 seconds of unfiltered cruelty. The backlash was immediate. The documentary Carter's Truth dropped online and through limited community screenings. By morning, Twitter had already renamed the footage 38 seconds of silence. Within hours, the former bistro owner was forced to resign from the Charleston Historical Preservation Board. Yelp and Google flooded with one-star reviews. Former staff came forward anonymously to confirm that the culture was always like that. Black vets weren't welcome. Activist groups began demanding a new kind of accountability: racial audits of veteran service organizations, restaurant licensing boards, and hospitality companies. The headline on the route read, "When thank you for your service is followed by get out. The truth about Elijah Carter." CNN did a primetime special. MSNBC followed suit. Even the Pentagon, typically silent during social controversy, issued a statement acknowledging the historical and ongoing erasure of black veterans from narratives of American valor. But for Elijah, none of that mattered as much as what happened in the dark theater that smelled of popcorn and nerves. The documentary's first private screening was held in a small Charleston cinema, once segregated, now renovated into a community arts center. The room was filled to capacity, the crowd thick with veterans, students, families, historians, and local press. Elijah sat in the back, cane across his lap, hat low over his brow. Naomi sat beside him, knuckles white from tension. Logan stood along the wall, near the exit, arms folded, scanning the room out of habit. As the lights dimmed and the opening scenes began, the air grew still. There were no trailers, no credits, just Elijah's voice, crackling from a recorder. "I didn't ask to be a symbol. I just asked to be seen." For the next 90 minutes, the audience did not move. The laughter in the diner, the whisper from the child, The medal that came 50 years too late. The brick through the window. The classified memo. The handshake between Senator Granger and the unnamed man with the Pentagon pass. All of it played unfiltered, unnarrated, unsoftened. When the screen finally faded to black, the silence was unbearable. And then one person stood. A veteran in full uniform, Vietnam era. He walked slowly to the front, turned to face Elijah, and saluted. Another followed, then another. Soon the entire room stood, a sea of salutes and trembling hands, some over hearts, some raised, some wrapped in old medals and memory. Elijah didn't rise. He just sat there, tears streaking down his face. No sobs, no fanfare, just quiet grief, the kind that comes when decades of being unseen suddenly shatter into 1,000 acknowledgments too late. Naomi wiped her cheek silently. Logan looked at Elijah and saw something he hadn't seen in him before. Release. After the crowd dispersed, a line formed. One by one, people came forward to shake his hand, to thank him, to apologize not for what they had done, but for what they had failed to notice. A Korean war vet whispered, "I should have spoken up sooner." A young black woman said, "My grandfather never got his flag. You gave him his honor back." A white man, former Army Ranger, said, "I always thought I understood my uniform. Now I realize I only understood my reflection in it." And then, near the end of the line, came a young man in dress blues. A cadet barely out of high school, chest rising and falling like someone holding back something deeper than breath. He stopped in front of Elijah, stiffened, and saluted sharply. "You don't know me, sir," he said, "but I saw your story, watched it 3 times. Elijah looked up, eyes narrowed kindly. The cadet's voice cracked. "I was gonna skip college, wasn't sure who I wanted to be. But then I saw you stand. You didn't yell. You didn't curse. You didn't run." He reached into his jacket and pulled out a folded letter. "My acceptance into the Navy came last week. I'm enlisting because of you." He paused. "You made me want to wear the uniform. Not for a flag, but for integrity." He held out the letter, hands shaking. Elijah took it slowly. He didn't smile. He just nodded, placing a hand on the cadet's shoulder. "I didn't fight to make men brave," he said. "I fought so boys like you wouldn't have to prove you belong." As they turned to leave, Naomi's phone buzzed again. This time, no message, just a low-resolution video attachment. She played it in the parking lot. The camera was shaky, but clear enough. A gloved hand unlocking a metal crate. Inside, folders labeled Swift Wind, unredacted testimony, and domestic suppression orders. Someone was leaking the rest. The street was quiet except for the sound of a cane tapping against cracked pavement. Slow and deliberate. Elijah Carter, now well into his 70s, walked with a limp more pronounced than before. But his back was still straight. His eyes, though weathered, scanned the painted walls of downtown Charleston, with a soft kind of disbelief. He stopped in front of a freshly painted mural. It towered over him, a full-body portrait, Elijah in uniform, not the Medal of Honor ceremony, but the original photo from Vietnam, mud-streaked, eyes fierce. His silhouette flanked by shadows of other black soldiers, names finally spelled out across the mural's base. Above them, in bold black letters, the ones they tried to erase. Below that, Carter's call: honor through truth. Elijah exhaled slowly, chest rising beneath his weathered jacket. Cars passed, some honking, some slowing down. A group of middle schoolers on a field trip pointed, and one of the teachers whispered to her students, "That's him. That's Mr. Carter." Elijah gave a slow wave. Just enough. He wasn't a celebrity. He was something harder to define. A reminder. A reckoning that had refused to soften for comfort. Months had passed since the documentary released. Since the cadet's salute. Since the anonymous footage leaked evidence of Swift Wind suppression orders, and decades of hidden shame. A congressional investigation had been launched. Archives reopened. Veterans across the country had come forward with their stories, some for the first time in their lives. But Elijah? He stayed grounded. He returned every message he could, attended every small town screening, sat in libraries with teenage filmmakers, and answered questions patiently. He declined interviews from glossy magazine covers. He had no desire to be commodified. Naomi, meanwhile, had published her book, a fiercely researched and emotionally searing account, titled The Forgotten Valor. It climbed the New York Times bestseller list within days. But more than sales, it landed where it mattered most, in classrooms. Schools across the nation began adding the forgotten valor to curriculum. Black history teachers called it required reading for a generation raised on filtered heroism. In districts that tried to ban it, students read it anyway. Logan became a sought-after speaker. Universities invited him to speak on racial equity in military institutions. Lawmakers asked for consultations. He became a visible force in spaces that had long whispered the language of diversity but rarely lived it. His talks weren't polite. They were honest. He told hard truths. And every single time he ended with Elijah's name. But Elijah, the man who walked into a diner and was told to leave, now had a different kind of presence in the country's conscience. Statues rose, not on military bases, but in public parks, city squares, and schoolyards, not to glorify war, but to honor the unseen courage that had never asked to be forgotten. The statues were deliberate, not him holding a gun or saluting a flag, but simply standing, as he had that day, head high, eyes forward facing a world that once refused to face him. Some towns resisted the installations. Too political, some said. Too much focus on race. But most embraced them. They called them mirrors in bronze. And children now grew up seeing Elijah Carter's name before they knew any presidents. One bright autumn afternoon, a city in South Carolina held a dedication for its new school, Elijah Carter Middle School. The ceremony was modest but heartfelt. Parents sat on fold-out chairs. Teachers clutched handkerchiefs. Veterans of all races lined the back, hands over hearts. Elijah walked slowly to the podium, Naomi on one side, Logan on the other. His speech was brief. "I'm not a hero," he began. "I'm a mirror of a country that asked for my blood, but not my name." He looked out at the children. "Let this place be a promise that no child here will have to prove their worth through silence or scars." Later that day, back at the community center, Elijah sat quietly in a room surrounded by portraits, faces he had helped bring back into the public record. Naomi was signing books. Logan was answering questions. And then a woman approached Elijah. Young, nervous, holding the hand of a boy, no older than 10. "My son wanted to meet you," she said. The boy wore a tiny replica army jacket, his wide brown eyes locked on Elijah like he'd just seen a living legend. Elijah leaned forward. "What's your name?" "Isaiah," the boy whispered. "You thinking about joining the army, Isaiah?" The boy shrugged. "I just want to be brave, like you." Elijah smiled faintly. Brave's not just marching into battle. Sometimes it's walking into a place that don't want you and staying upright. From around his neck, he removed his Medal of Honor. Slowly, carefully, he held it out. Isaiah froze. His mother gasped. "Oh no, we couldn't." But Elijah gently placed the medal around the boy's neck. It hung low against the child's chest, oversized and gleaming. "This ain't mine anymore," Elijah said. "It belongs to who's next." The room was silent. Naomi watched from across the hall, eyes glassy. Logan turned his face, jaw tight. Elijah looked at the boy, and then, loud enough for all to hear, spoke his final line. "Let this country see you now, because they refused to see me then." The boy nodded solemnly. A camera flash went off. But Elijah didn't blink. That was the end of his war. Not in noise, not in battle cries, but in the passing of one legacy to the next, unmuted and unashamed. As the crowd dispersed and the room emptied, Logan stepped outside for air, only to find a letter tucked beneath his windshield wiper. No address, no signature, just one sentence. "The real archive is beneath Arlington." Operation Dovetail wasn't just buried, it was protected. They silenced his name for decades. But now the truth is louder than their lies. If you believe no one should have to earn their humanity, type "yes" for justice. And subscribe if this story broke your heart, like it did ours.